Let's start this off with a little game to help you understand how bizarre and unpredictable this show really is. I want you to try to figure out what all of these next clips have in common. At first it may seem like all of these stories have nothing to do with each other, but they actually have one big connecting tissue. They all happen in the same motel room. And that is the gist of Room 104, an HBO anthology series about the people who visit the seemingly ordinary motel room and the bizarre, scary, funny, and surprisingly emotional events that happen inside these walls. The show is a creation of Mark Duplass, and his goal was to make a series where truly anything could happen. A genreless show where audiences would have no idea what to expect at the start of each episode. That's how you end up with horror stories about vampires, bizarre rashes, creepy kids, and never-ending nightmares. As well as musical type stories that can range from a no-dialogue modern dance episode to a more classic musical about a shy nerd trying to remember the tragic events of his first ever night out. And even an over-the-top Highlander-style musical about two time-traveling immortal warriors. But also a fourth wall break episode about a man who realizes he's stuck in a sitcom, or a twisted fairy tale about the dangers of being too nice. There are also Spanish mythical melodramas, a wrestler going through dollhouse therapy, voluntary cannibals, and animated teenage werewolves. Drama, comedy, sci-fi, romance, horror, musical, documentary, found footage, and animation. The sheer variety of styles, genres, and tones is truly astonishing, and every single story is set in the same motel room. A show that's just a hodgepodge of bizarre and silly ideas should have been just a total mess. But instead, it became a cult hit for HBO that ended its run with 48 episodes spread across 4 seasons. So how the hell was that possible? That's what you'll discover by the end of this video. We're gonna first learn who Mark Duplass is, and how his struggles with a successful career inspired him to create this show. To then go over the 5 rules that guided Room 104's unique production process, and finally find out how all of this created the secret recipe of Room 104, revealing the 3 simple elements Mark Duplass used to create a special place that helped artists deal with the biggest challenges of making any creative work, turning what could have been just a hodgepodge of bizarre and silly ideas into the most unique, engaging, and unpredictable show you've never seen. To understand what makes Room 104 special, we gotta first learn who Mark Duplass is, and how he figured out the secret to dealing with one of the biggest challenges that anyone faces when trying to create anything. Mark and his brother Jay loved making little home movies since they were kids, and it was this passion that led them to study film in college, giving both the opportunity of working with small-scale local productions to earn some money, and they decided to use it to fund their first feature film. After they had finally saved enough money, the Duplass brothers put everything into a big production. They rented expensive equipment and hired a bunch of people. This was supposed to be their big break, their first real movie, so they gave it their absolute best, spending every single dime that they both had and didn't have. And when they finished shooting the film, they realized it was total garbage. They wouldn't be able to edit their hours of footage into any sort of coherent movie. Mark and Jay felt completely lost and defeated. With not a single buck to their names, there was no way for them to start from scratch and make another movie. This was it. They've bet everything on this and they still came out short. They were not good enough. At this moment, they started feeling a growing sense of self-doubt, anxiety, and fear that slowly turned into a voice inside their heads. To make a real movie, you gotta spend a ton of money and hire a bunch of people. You blew your only shot of ever making it. You gave your best and it wasn't enough. Who did you think you were to even try to make a movie? You're way out of your league. What's the point of even trying again? They were faced with an invisible and unrelenting force. They've encountered resistance.
Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. It will perjure, fabricate, falsify, seduce, bully, cajole. Resistance is protean. It will assume any form if that's what it takes to deceive you. It will reason with you like a lawyer or jam a 9mm in your face like a stick-up man. Resistance has no conscience. It will pledge anything to get a deal, then double-cross you as soon as your back is turned. If you take resistance at its word, you deserve everything you get.
Resistance is an energy field, a repelling force, a single-minded entity hell-bent on one simple goal: to stop you from doing any meaningful work and to push you away from your deepest desires. And I'm not talking about just creative work like writing or making films, but also things like starting your own business, eating healthier, exercising, overcoming addictions or destructive habits, learning something new. Basically anything that can change your life for the better or turn you into the best person you could possibly be. Resistance shows up the moment you decide to reject immediate gratification in exchange for long-term growth and health. The more important and desirable your goal is, the greater and stronger resistance will be. Resistance is a term coined by Steven Pressfield in his book The War of Art: Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles. In The War of Art, Pressfield argues that recognizing resistance and its symptoms is the first step in being able to overcome it. Because while resistance may start as just a feeling of fear or self-doubt, it will slowly lead you to self-sabotage by using its two favorite weapons: procrastination and rationalization. Resistance loves when you tell yourself that you're going to start working on your goal, but not right now, not today or this week, because of dozens of rational reasons. You're just too busy or too tired, you have other responsibilities, or just don't have enough money, and on and on and on.
What's particularly insidious about the rationalizations that resistance presents to us is that a lot of them are true. They're legitimate. What resistance leaves out, of course, is that all this means diddly. Tolstoy had 13 kids and wrote War and Peace.
There will never be a moment when you have no barriers whatsoever stopping you from working on your goal. The problem with letting these rational, justifiable reasons stop you from taking action is that you slowly allow resistance to take control of your life, making you feel miserable, bored, and restless, living in a state of constant unhappiness. And if you don't do anything about it, resistance can make you hate your life and yourself. Living by resistance terms will lead you to develop addictions and depression, setting your life on a self-destructive path.
You know, Hitler wanted to be an artist. At 18, he took his inheritance and moved to Vienna to live and study. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts and later to the School of Architecture. Ever see one of his paintings? Neither have I. Resistance beat him. Call it overstatement, but I'll say it anyway. It was easier for Hitler to start World War II than it was for him to face a blank square of canvas.
And all of this could have happened to Mark Duplass, except that at his lowest point, he discovered how to beat resistance. He became aware of its symptoms when he noticed that his failure, fear, rationalizations and limitations were making him feel unhappy, restless, and miserable. Because all of these things were stopping him from doing the thing he wanted the most. And it was this sense of growing frustration that spurred him into action. He told his brother that he wanted to make something right then and there with whatever they had in hand. If Mark and Jay wanted to become filmmakers, they had to try to make movies, consistently over and over again. That's how you beat resistance, by just trying, by committing yourself to your goal in the process, by sitting down every day to do the work.
The amateur believes he must first overcome his fear, then he can do his work. The professional knows that fear can never be overcome. He knows there is no such thing as a fearless warrior or a dread-free artist.
Just like the reasons that stop you from doing something will never cease to exist, resistance will also always be there. You will never truly completely defeat it. But when you commit yourself to face resistance every day, something special happens. It slowly seems to weaken, while you start feeling energized, focused, and determined. When you commit yourself to your goal despite life's challenges and your own fears, when you simply decide to try to do the work with whatever the means and skills you have right now, things slowly work out. So Mark and Jay borrowed their dad's old video camera and together in just a single afternoon made a 7-minute short film called This Is John.
I know you can do this, so let's just, come on, okay? There's nothing to be afraid of. Here we go. Hi. Hi, this is John.
It was far from a perfect movie, but this short was a finished piece of work that showed what type of stories the Duplass brothers could tell. And after overcoming resistance once again to submit their little imperfect film to the Sundance Festival, the Duplass brothers blew up. This Is John kickstarted their entire careers, leading to the creation of the Duplass brothers Productions that has produced over 40 movies and TV shows. Just like their first short film, the Duplass brothers movies are very cheap and quick productions. Most of them are just small-scale relationship dramas. A good example of a typical Duplass story is Room 104's episode, The Missionaries.
Really?
I mean, we were there for over an hour and a half. She was obviously engaged.
She was definitely interested.
What are you insinuating?
She was hot for you, Elder.
Stop it.
What? I didn't say anything bad.
Okay, were you thinking it?
Oh, come on. You don't have those kinds of thoughts?
If I do, I just don't entertain them at all.
What do you do then?
I pray to Heavenly Father.
When two young Mormons end up spending the night in the room, one of them starts questioning his faith, and after getting what they believe to be a sign from God, both decide to take this opportunity to let loose for one night, to do everything they're not supposed to as a way to test their faith, as they also come to realize how they really feel about each other. The Duplass stories are usually very honest, emotional, and funny. They love to focus on the everyday struggles of ordinary people, and that is the secret for their success. These types of small-scale character dramas allowed Mark and Jay to produce many movies quickly and with a ton of freedom, because their backers didn't have to invest a lot of money in these films, and since they were so cheap to make, the Duplass brothers movies never failed to turn a profit. But Mark started to notice that all this freedom came with the expectations of him sticking to this grounded character drama house style. Mark was beginning to feel anxious, to feel a pressure to consistently deliver the same type of story. The industry and audience will always expect the same things from you. What if you're never able to try something different and experiment with some of your wilder and crazier ideas? What if you burn out? If you get sick and tired of just doing the same thing and become unable to keep delivering the type of stories that people expect from you? Resistance came back with a vengeance. But right as Resistance was about to overwhelm Mark, an opportunity showed up. The Duplass brothers Productions managed to sign a deal with HBO, and Mark had an idea. What if Mark brought to the small screen his cheap, quick, and small-scale filmmaking model? What if he was able to convince HBO to greenlight an old idea of his?
Guys, remember this thing? Do you think maybe they'll let us do this now? And we're like, probably not. But we went into HBO and we said, listen, we're going to build a set of a hotel room. We're going to do every kind of story you can possibly imagine. It's going to be tonally all over the place. And we're not even going to really tell you about what the things we're making. Cool? And they were like, yeah. And we're like, but no, really? And they were like, yeah, go for it.
That's how Room 104 came to be. When pitching his idea to HBO, Mark told them that 4 very simple rules would guide his entire production. Rule number 1. Film the show's 30-minute episodes in 3 days. Rule number 2. Have at most 3 actors per episode. Rule number 3. Never leave the room. And rule number 4. Tell a story in a different style or genre with each episode. But as the show went on, Mark came up with a 5th very important rule that we're gonna talk about later in the video. So HBO greenlit Room 104 because, like the Duplass brothers movies, it was a very safe bet. Mark likes to say that they weren't asking for Game of Thrones money. They would build a single set, have no recurring cast, and work with just a small crew. These rules were there to create a limitation that gave Mark complete freedom to make a genre-agnostic series, where he could play around with many different types of stories. And it's exactly this tonal Russian roulette that makes Room such a unique experience. Since you never have any idea what to expect at the start of an episode, you naturally end up watching things closer, trying to figure out what type of story you're about to watch. Is it going to be funny? Sad? Scary? Bizarre? Surreal? Sometimes it can be all of the above, because while some episodes can start in one genre, the stories quite often go into unexpected places, and by the end, they can become something completely different. An episode that does exactly this is Mr. Mobile. The story begins with an older gentleman visiting another man in room 104. As the story goes on, we learn that this gentleman is Mr. Moveo, a retired middle school music teacher, and that the man waiting for him in the room used to be his student. It turns out that this man got in touch with Mr. Moveo because he wanted to discuss something very important with his former music teacher.
I'm not sure, really. Because that's the most seminal part of it for me. That's the part that affected me the most. You and me alone together in the classroom. That's what made me the man I am today.
The man starts talking about an incident that happened between the two of them one day after class, an event that haunted him throughout his entire life. The teacher apparently has no idea what this man is talking about. Or maybe he does. The story seems to be going to a very dark place. Except things suddenly take a turn into something extremely bizarre. The episode then becomes the story of this deranged man deciding after all these years to make Mr. Moveo tell him the truth about that day once and for all. This is just one example of the types of stories Mark Duplass wanted to tell in his show. Unpredictable, bizarre tales that you wouldn't find anywhere else. He wanted to keep the audience guessing every week, surprising them with each new episode. And this is the first element that made Room 104 work. Complete freedom of style. A fast and cheap production that had no specific genre became an environment with low pressure and expectations from both HBO and the audience, giving Mark a space to let his creativity go wild, allowing him to churn out whatever crazy story he wanted.
When we first started this show, I was looking at it as a bit of a creative outlet to explore a different side of myself creatively than we were currently doing sort of inside of the Duplass brothers brand, you know? And we never intended on there being a brand, but the kind of art that Jay and I tended to create, it had an aura around itself and a tone and an energy. And I was just like wanting to break out and have an affair.
And that was all great on paper, but Mark quickly realized that he alone wouldn't be able to live up to the promise of the show. He knew he would break under the pressure of having to constantly surprise viewers. He knew that if he had to create these stories alone, resistance would beat him. That's why from the get-go, Mark decided to not be the only creative voice in the show. So together with Mel Westland, the president of Duplass Brothers Productions, Julian was the series composer, and Sidney Fleischman, the series co-showrunner, Mark created the Room 104 story group. They would always brainstorm ideas for all 12 stories of each season, and after Mark finished writing the episode scripts, the story group would go over all of them together one last time. But this level of collaboration was not enough for Mark, because he was basically the only writer of the show, so at the end of the day, most stories ended up being all about his experiences in perspective. If he was the only one telling stories, things would become predictable and stale very fast.
Through the first season, we realized that yes, this is a place to tell explosive and different stories out of a darker side of Mark's brain. We realized that by partnering with other creators, we were able to tell wildly different stories than we were capable of telling ourselves.
Mark would have to bring even more people in, deciding to not use Room just as an outlet for his ideas, but also for a variety of eager artists from different backgrounds that could bring new styles and perspectives to the show.
Hikers was a fun episode to make because Lauren Budd knew how to voice people that age in a way that me at 42, I just can't do with that sort of veracity. It's essentially an analysis of what frenemies really are, and wrote it so with such a clear vision of how these girls would speak and behave, and downright despicable behavior.
All those times you needed a friend, who was there? And trust me, I do it out of love. I have no idea how you live inside your body. And I give up, you know? Just stay repulsive.
This collaborative environment would allow other creators to tell their stories with very little pressure and complete freedom to make whatever they were most passionate about.
Janae Lamarck brought us the concept of bangs. She said, I want to make a feminist version of The Christmas Carol where a woman keeps cutting her bangs and changing personas.
We could see where the night takes us.
I immediately knew we were going to make it off of that pitch.
I had this sentence float through my head one day. You become a different girl with every millimeter of bang you cut.
And then I remember she said, and it'll be great because like the scissors will have this great sound effect that just goes shing. And I was like, all right, just go do it.
no one would have to worry about carrying the show or making a perfect, incredible episode that everybody would love. They just had to give their best and make something they believed in. And whenever they felt overwhelmed or uncertain about anything, whenever resistance showed up, they could count on other experienced people to help them out. This is the second element that made Room 104 work: collaboration. That's how the series was able to constantly deliver unique and surprising stories. Like the episode The Internet, where a young writer is going to New York to present his first book to a big publisher. Except he forgets his manuscript at home.
Stop laughing. It's not that funny. Mom, it's not that funny. Please, okay?
Okay.
Listen,
What do you want me to do?
So what we're gonna do is, you're gonna send me an email from my mail account, okay? With a copy of my book, which is in a Word document, which is in a folder on my desktop. Easy, right?
Anish, I'm not understanding what you are saying.
What starts as a funny and anxiety-inducing story slowly turns into a very heartwarming tale about a mother's love for her son in a long-held family secret.
I love you, Mom.
I love you too, my baby boy.
This entire episode came to be because Mark wanted to showcase the skills of a very underrated actor, Karen Sonny.
You know, I met Karin when we did Safety Not Guaranteed together, which was, I think, your first job, like right out of.
Oh, second. I was in an MTV TV movie called Worst Prom Ever.
Right. So it was
come
your
on,
first
Mark.
project ever. And so when we brought him on to do that episode that I wrote for him called The Internet, I knew Karin's ability to improvise. And when we say improvise, I don't just mean come up with good jokes. I mean, I wrote this script fast, Karin. I know you know how I write, and I know it's flawed, and I know you're really, really smart, and you're going to improvise this thing and make me look better and make the episode better. So he was already like writing and authoring that stuff, and that's very emblematic of the whole collaborative process. Like Room 104 it has such an artsy, craftsy vibe to it, of like a bunch of 12-year-olds running around being like, that'd be cool. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. You know, it's like Beavis and Butthead art, like totally.
That episode was in season 1, but during the production of season 4, Karen told Mark that he liked to take a stab at directing. And by pure chance, Mark had just finished working on a script and he thought Karen would be a perfect fit for the story.
Sup? Hi. Hey, peace. How you doing?
Fine.
Okay, good. Good, that's good. That's good. So do you think, like, are you feeling ready?
I don't know what the you're talking about. Ready for what? That's not even a real laugh. What? Are you choking now?
Oh man!
What? What's so funny?
You are Sam.
Sometimes even huge actors like Mahershala Ali would get in touch with the show wanting to work in an episode. Mark took opportunities like these to ask the actors what type of character or story they would like to star in, writing a script tailor-made to their interests and strengths. In Mahershala's case, he wanted to play a pool hustler in a story set in the 80s.
Still can't believe that motherfucker Larry dude coming up in there with them dinosaur-looking motherfucking yellow-ass crusty toenails poking through his sandals like that. Who the fuck you think he is? Disrespecting a place like that. I swear, man. Every now and then I start to feel sorry for one of these stupid motherfuckers we put the hustle on, and then I meet somebody like Toenail Larry disrespecting the joint. Make me want to drive a pool cue right through his dirty-ass up foot. Should have took his dumb ass for everything he was worth.
Which became the season 2 episode Shark, a story of two cousins that start to disagree on how to handle their business.
Beat your ass.
This collaboration process helped keep the show fresh and unpredictable. But another huge factor in keeping things surprising was having to deal with the limitations of the room itself. Mark and the story group were constantly asking themselves what they could do next, always trying new things and taking bigger risks to keep the show from getting stale. And after 2 seasons, they realized that maybe they could play around with the concept of the room itself, deciding on a new rule for the show. Rule number 5. You can bend the other rules just a little bit to make a story better. So with each passing season, the show took the concept of the motel room in crazier and more bizarre directions, pushing the boundaries of what could be defined as the room, like the episode The Plot, the secret origin of Room 104. Mark and the group came up with an idea and tone for the story. It would be set on an empty plot of land, the place where Room 104 would eventually be built, and it would give a possible explanation for why so many bizarre events happen in this room. But instead of Mark himself simply running with this concept, he reached out to Macon Blair, an actor who had recently written and directed his first feature film. And Mark just pitched the idea and let Macon tell the story in his own style.
Now you're mine too. And I like you better.
Seasons 4, The Last Man also plays around with time and the space around the room.
What if we tried to make a truly epic, battling, time-traveling, musical episode that is an homage to movies like The Highlander and The Terminator?
This episode was written by series composer Julian Walls, and it is a musical about two time-traveling immortal warriors who fight each other throughout time, except they always end up battling in the same space where Room 104 will be.
And it all up comes to absolutely nothing.
Other episodes use the room as more of a representation of something else rather than an actual physical space. For example, in the episode Josie and Me.
Okay, so there actually is something you can help me with. And you're old, so you might see something I don't. So here's my dilemma. Over here, that's Donovan. He is very stupid, but he kind of has this like douchey hot thing going for him, like a douchebag was surgically implanted into a 10-foot tall child. But his dad is like super loaded, so he could kind of come in handy for like a non-disgusting sugar daddy to support me while I'm becoming a writer. So he's a great option, you know?
This one is about a woman trying to make sense of a traumatic event in her past, and the entire episode is framed as a conversation between her present and younger self. The room turns into a recreation of their memories, so present Josie can try to make her younger self come to terms with a horrible event.
I just want you to know that it's okay to feel bad about what happened. I'm fine. Okay? You're the one who's still hung up on it. I know. I need to forget. You don't forget.
And beyond the show continuously telling stories in different genres while pushing the boundaries of the room, it also plays around with the structure and style of the episodes too. The show has first-person found footage style episodes like Itchy, where a man suffers from a bizarre, almost supernatural rash, or The Man and the Baby and the Man, where a couple finds out in the worst way possible that they want different things from life. There's also an episode that's structured like a twisted fairy tale, where a narrator tells a story about a guy who maybe is a little too nice.
He was conflicted. His mother had always taught him, be kinder than necessary, for you never know what someone is going through.
Jesus.
Sage advice for sure. Nevertheless, hard advice to follow.
In Season 3, we have a full-blown 2D animated episode about teenage werewolves. And in Season 4, there's an episode that's basically a wrestler going through dollhouse therapy, while using a miniature version of the room to reenact his traumas. There's even a fourth wall break episode about the protagonist of a sitcom realizing he's a character stuck in a never-ending series.
Okay, maybe we watch our language in front of the kids?
But one of the biggest swings the show took was the episode A New Song, where Mark and Mel Aslin tried to tell a story by projecting images on the walls while a musician composed some new music at the same time. Room 104 became all about constant experimentation, and that's the last element that made Room 104 work: the courage to constantly try to create something new. Thanks to the freedom granted by Mark's production process, they could continue taking bigger risks, learning and growing from their experiences and collaborations, trying whatever crazy idea they wanted, pushing the limits of the room and what type of stories could be told in it. But there was one episode that Mark and the story group were terrified to make, an episode that is about all the elements that made Room 104 such an unique show.
I'm in Room 104. What a trip.
Mark invited a family of artists, a father and son who were big fans of the show, to make art using whatever they wanted in Room 104, while the show's crew filmed their entire creative process. During the episode, we learned that Jimmy is not a formally trained artist. Like Mark, he's just a guy who likes to express himself by creating things quickly with whatever he's got. And the reason he got into art in the first place was because of his father. Like the environment that Mark created for other artists in Room 104, Jimmy's home was also a very nurturing environment for creativity.
As a little kid, I just remember a present father. He just created like a nurturing environment for creativity. I mean, he would put on like Tracy Chapman and music, and like we would get pots and pans and play the drums.
Jimmy always loved expressing himself through art, but for a long time he wasn't able to create anything because resistance took control of his life, setting him on a self-destructive path for many years, where he struggled with resistance symptoms, developed addictions, and became unable to deal with his mental illness. He could no longer do what he loved, and he almost destroyed his relationship with his father. It was only after hitting rock bottom multiple times that he and his dad were able to finally reconnect. He then found himself back in a nurturing environment, and Jimmy started making art together with his dad again. But Jimmy still felt enormous resistance whenever he tried to create anything.
Like, I was scared. I thought I wouldn't be able to do art again, but you just do art. I did art about not being able to do art again. I did a piece of art because I was frustrated, because it didn't feel right, but I still did it. But in the time, I was just so angry. I just felt like, this is foreign to me, I don't know what to do, but you persist. You continue to do your craft a little bit each day.
By simply showing up every day, sitting down, and doing the work, things slowly worked out.
For me, the mainstay has been this mantra I've had, which is process is king. And I find that like in the moment of creating, no matter what your mental state is, there's some magical machination that happens in the moment of doing something. Whether you're hitting the keys on the piano, whether you're a dancer and you're in the moment of flight, whether you're hitting the canvas for the first time, and it's just that movement of the brush on the canvas. In that moment, that's where it is. That's where it's at. No matter what my state is, I can go to that and have that as my like centered, boom, know what to do. That's the gratifying thing. That's why I do art.
This episode is a real story of two people who used art to defeat resistance and to fix their relationship. We watch them going through their creative process, all the struggles, doubts, stops, and starts that happen when you make anything. And we see them slowly figuring things out, collaborating, discussing ideas, working on each other's pieces to create something that they couldn't have made alone.
You know, maybe part of the thing about doing this thing is that I'm hoping when somebody sees this is that, yeah, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of scars, there's a lot of wounding, but you know, there is healing and there's light at the end of the tunnel. But you gotta do the work, you gotta do the time.
Jimmy and Gianni ended up being a perfect example of what Room 104 is. With the show, Mark created a space designed to help other creators defeat resistance, letting them follow their instincts and passions, making everyone feel a sense of safety with very little pressure, a place where they could just go wild and have fun, knowing that there were a lot of people who could help them along the way. While this whole show started just as an outlet for Mark to tell whatever stories he wanted, he quickly figured out that by collaborating with different types of eager artists, the show could be so much more than that. The result is a show full of extremely personal stories. Room 104 is never weird, bizarre, unsettling or dark for its own sake. The stories always come from a very intimate place, with very human and relatable characters exposing truths and secrets about themselves. Room is a place that invites both creators and characters to go a little wild, to feel free to experiment in ways that they couldn't anywhere else. Because of this, it became a completely unpredictable show. And this is at the same time the greatest strength and weakness of Room 104. Depending on your tastes and preferences, some episodes may range from being simply boring to just plain awful. But that's kinda the point of the show. It is a tonal Russian roulette after all. It's about you experiencing different things. Like any good anthology series, every episode can be at the same time somebody's favorite episode and another person's most hated one. But even if you don't like an episode, you can just skip to the next one, because the only certainty you have with the show is that the next episode is going to be something completely different than the last. And it is this courage to consistently take wild swings and tell deeply personal and bizarre stories that makes Room 104 the most unique engaging, and unpredictable show you've never seen.